Hi, Missy. Welcome to the Rule Breaker Studio. We are so excited to have you with us today. So, I do want to share Missy and I were able to participate in the AONL Director Fellowship together, which is how we are wonderfully connected. And then, of course, I'm sure all of our rule breakers know by now that Crystal and I were introduced through the AONL Director Fellowship. And, of course, that's how Missy knows her as well, I think, right? You all didn't know, like, have some kind of like weird connection before then. Um, so, so just paying homage to the AONL Director Fellowship for bringing us together and helping us to know great women and great people and great healthcare leaders. So, with that being said, I'd love to jump into the conversation and have you just tell the listeners a little bit more about Missy and what you've got going on, and then let's jump into your healthcare thoughts.
Okay. I've been a nurse since 2003. I graduated from TCU, which is Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, and started as a new grad nurse on a pediatric intensive care unit and worked there for a couple of years. And then met my sweet husband, and he whisked us away to Paris, Texas, which is this tiny, tiny town in East Texas. And I got 3 shifts to learn how to become an emergency room nurse. I hadn't started an IV, I hadn't done a Foley, I hadn't done anything. And they were kind enough to give me 3 shifts, and then I was on my own. And so I worked there for about 3 years almost. And then my husband was a high school football coach. And so he moved us back to the Dallas Fort Worth area to coach at TCU, actually, which was really exciting. And I called back the pediatric unit that I was on and said, "Hey, will you take me back?" And they said, "For sure, but you have to work night shift." And I would rather wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning than stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning. So I took a job with a travel company. We hadn't sold our house in Paris, Texas, and so we were able to use that as a residence. And I got planted at the current hospital that I'm at now, which is Texas Health HEB, which is right kind of by the Dallas Fort Worth airport. And so I started in there as a traveler. In the emergency department, worked there for about a year. They started eliminating all of their travelers. We knew we were relocating to the area, so I just signed on as a regular staff member here. And I have always found my way into leadership because I always feel like there's ways to fix things, and I speak up too much, and then I end up somehow taking over whatever program that is. I did that as I became a lead hostess in high school. I became a swim lesson coordinator when I was in college, and it just has always followed me because I just always think, there's a better way to do this, and then I can't keep my mouth shut. And so I was a staff nurse here for about a year, and then I applied for the emergency nurse manager position and did that role for 10 years. And I loved it. It was probably one of my favorite roles I've ever had. I had about 120 staff members. We're a 44-bed emergency department, 60,000 visits a year. Helped get our level 3 trauma designation, our primary heart attack certification, we're a primary stroke center, all of those things. And then I got approached by our CNO who said, "Hey, I think you should stretch a little bit. How about you take over heart and vascular?" And I said, "I don't know anything about heart and vascular. I know STEMIs, but that's about it." So I took that role for about 3 years, and then the associate chief nursing officer came open about 2 years ago. And so I interviewed for that. And now I have to say the ACNO role is definitely my favorite role. It's very operationally based. I love the ability to make changes, have input, have kind of a bigger oversight of the whole hospital and getting to understand how everything happens. So that's my current role. I've been there in that role about 2 years now. So.
You said a few things that I'm just dying to know more about. So now you're in an ACNO role, and most of it's operational. You talked about during your days as a nurse manager, you had over 100 direct reports. And so that's such a big hot topic right now.
Right.
Span of control. So, what's going on where you're at, or what are you seeing as the trends to help those people? Because that I've never been in an ACNO role, but the nurse manager role is the hardest I ever had, but also the most rewarding, the
Right.
best role I ever had. So, what are you seeing to help keep them in these roles?
I mean, not enough, to be honest. When I first took over, our director and myself were brand new into the leadership role, at least here at our hospital. And we had a lot of support from our executive leadership. And so we were able to hire our own educator within the emergency department, which is unheard of now. And then we had 6 supervisors. And so we worked really hard to make sure one was in charge every day. And that really helped us. We moved from the worst hospital in our system, which is a 21 hospital system, as far as our patient satisfaction. And in 2 years, we had it flipped and we were the #1. And a lot of that had to do with accountability. A lot of it had to do with hiring. We had a theory that said, our family caring for your family. We hired for fit, not fill. And that worked a lot to really drive and change the culture. Since then, we have
Can I
gone
just
through.
pause you a second? I want you to say that again because that was gold. Our
Yeah,
our family caring for your family. You are hiring for people basically who believe what you believe.
absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
this is going to be the highlight for me. What you just said right there. Okay.
Well, and we
Sorry
had
to
this
interrupt. That was just good.
we went to the ENA and we had this theory we wanted to be the best emergency department in the universe, not the United States, not the world, the universe, because Mars is real competitive. But we really like set that standard, and that's who we work to hire. We were green early on and did some fill positions and then worked a year to chase those people out. And so when we really scaled it back and got really picky with who we hired, that was how we were really able to move the needle. And so current state right now, they only have 4 supervisors. I mean, through multiple iterations of reductions in force, sadly, and we no longer have educators. And so I would say, honestly, I think every one of my managers at our hospital would probably give their left arm to have their own department-wide educator. I think if that could be our #1 focus for nurse manager support, that would be huge. I mean, they're chasing around. I just sent an email out to all of our nurse managers because we have over 1,300 employees on the competency list because they didn't get turned in on time. And it's like no one has time to chase that around. If we could have somebody that helps with the onboarding and just even some of the pencil whipping paperwork, it would be incredibly helpful. So.
Okay, so as a former leader of professional practice, I just want to echo, I think people misunderstand the value of some of those support roles, because when you're thinking about Crystal had tagged in on the the scope and span of control just with managing employees. Then if you tag in okay, they're also don't have these additional support roles that are often led by a clinician who understands the workflows and understands the competency needs and the time frames and all of that, all that goes into that. It really does further increase the scope and span and responsibility of the nurse manager. So I think it's really important that you shared that from your operational standpoint, that these really are pivotal roles that help to support those clinicians. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So what other questions do you have for me?
So I saw Crystal unmuting, so I'm trying to.
Yeah. I really want to hang my hat on that piece about hiring for the people who believe what you believe. I'm sorry to revisit it, but how are you doing that? I really believe that that's a difference maker in culture. 100%. What your true north is, which is be the best in the universe. I don't know if it's still that, but the true north. You have people that are on board to do that. How do you do that when you're worried about? It's hard to recruit people right now, and we worry about getting the wrong people off of the bus because how are we going to fill that position? But even though we know half the time you do that and your team is like, thank you so much. I know we're down a person, but it feels like we're up 5 because we're not having to deal with this. But how do you maintain that in today's, we're just struggling.
One of the things we implemented is we did peer panel interviews, and I still stand by that. I can fall in love with anybody in an interview. I'm a sucker. I mean, people tell you great stories about them. I'm like, oh, they're so great. And then you get them on the floor and you're like, not so great. So we implemented peer panel interviews. We got a couple of our staff, our UBC chair, and then we really worked on them interviewing the candidate. And that made a huge difference also, so that they had some ownership in the hiring too. So when that person sucked, they were like, Oh yeah, I participated in that. I own some of that decision making. But then it also kind of made a friendly face for those new hires too when they got there. I was like, hey, you're on my interview panel. Now I'm here. At least they had kind of a friend that they recognized when they first got here too. And then we also, one of the big things we did for our culture is we did an annual retreat. And again, we had a lot of really great support from our executive leadership back in the day, and we still do. But it was mandatory for all staff to go. We put together a contract that said, if you work in our emergency department, this is what we expect. We expect that you're going to be kind and caring. We expect that you're going to talk to individuals first before elevating a concern, because we had a lot of peer-to-peer issues. And so, and really kind of put together like a 10 list contract that our leadership put together, and every staff member had to sign it. And then we had kind of just a fulfilling retreat every year, and we would host it on four different events, and everybody had to show up. We also had the providers show up, so we had a contracted emergency department physician group, and they all had to show up. But we also kind of engaged them too. We put them in front of a panel and said, what is the one thing we do that annoys you so bad? And they're like, oh, patient's not in a gown, obviously. I mean, or urine samples when you take 2 hours to get a urine sample, and so we kind of hashed through some funny things of like, what do they hate? What drives us crazy? And I think that kind of helped build some of that rapport and that relationship. And they're not doing the retreats anymore, but they are still doing the peer panels. They are still really actively engaged with the physician leadership too. So that has really helped too.
Okay, so I want to explore one thing. You shared about your career and like the career trajectory, and it included a lot of transitions. And I was just curious if you might share from your perspective, like, one, did you have like any kind of mentorship? Like, what did that look like? And how did you get support, or what were your processes for transitioning from those different roles? Because one thing that stood out to me was you got a tap on the shoulder to maybe transition into another type of leadership role. And I think people get scared, right? They get scared to say yes because they don't know what's on the other side of, if the grass is greener or not. And then how do they get support? So what did that look like for you in terms of like taking these leaps and making these career transitions?
Sure. So I'm a lifer. I am fine with staying put wherever I am because I enjoy what I do and I try to make the most of wherever I am. So I don't know, had people not tapped me, I would have grown. And so, but I mean, I'm just very dedicated and devout to what it is that I'm doing. And that really kind of showed in the 10 years that I stood as a manager. I love the role. And our director had been in that role a long time as well. And so we just really enjoyed each other and I wasn't really looking for anything. And so I do think, I was blessed in the sense that somebody said, hey, would you be interested? Hey, would you be interested? And, I'm always up for a good time. So sure, I'll do it. I mean, I may not know anything about heart and vascular. I didn't. But, I'm happy to get in there, ask the questions, befriend the staff, have a good time, and just keep asking why. And we actually just dropped our numbers, and it was like the highest revenue we've ever gotten in our entire hospital history, and a large chunk of that was heart and vascular. And so big piece of that I've kind of oversaw is really just meeting with the physicians, recruiting, talking with the staff, really engaging all of them. And I think that to me is kind of one of more of my superpowers. And so I'm happy to jump in whatever. Here's what I know and here's how I can help. And so I think that's kind of helped propel me further in my career too. So
I was thinking the same thing because, transition to practice is my jam. And so, how did you know? Because everything you're saying is, we sign these contracts, we show up, these are the expected behaviors. When you move into a director role, it's, how to manage, and now you're trying to lead
yeah,
that manage, and you have to get it done through them. And I'm sure, actually, I know, I'm not sure if you're willing to talk about it, but I know that all that didn't come naturally, right? Some of the things we do, we're like, wow, I could have done that better, right? But how
for
did you know to
sure.
do those things? Were you reading? Did you?
Um, you know, We were really big in conferences. We went to a conference every year and our current setup right now is a director can go to a conference every year and our managers can go every other year. But during that time frame, we were very conference heavy and we went to the ENA. I presented at the ENA. I mean, we were actively engaged in that. On top of that, we were also pursuing our magnet designation, and we finally just got that in 2022, which was really exciting, our initial designation. And so I think a lot of that, yes, is conferences. We did a book study. We did If Disney Ran Your Hospital, 9.5 Things You Would Do Differently. We did that with our leadership team. We did, what's the bus one? It's like Get On or Get Off the Bus. That was a big one for us because we were really working on accountability and getting our staff on the same page. So, I mean, I think all of that's important. It's so hard, I think, especially as the ER manager, everything's on fire, you're on fire. It's hard to sit down and just read a book, and through all this time, I had little kids. I mean, I had my daughter, I think 2 months into taking the manager role. And so, I had little kids. I remember at one point, I told my son, I was sorry I didn't pick him up from daycare on time. I got stuck in the hospital and he thought I was physically stuck. Like he couldn't comprehend. I was like, he's like, the doors would not open. And I'm like, well, kind of felt like it. So I don't know, I mean, I do think, stuff like this, podcasts are incredibly helpful, even for those people that are just on the go to just pick up little tidbits here and there. So it's so helpful. And, I mean, I recently joined Intonal, which is North Texas Organization of Nursing Leaders. And that was something I got pushed to do. I'm not the best networker because kids, life, when you're not here, I call it my job too. When I'm not here, I'm running around transporting people everywhere. So, but I have really, really enjoyed that role. It's really been fun. And really even the AONL fellowship to get to meet other people, hear everybody's struggles, know you're not by yourself. All of that has been incredibly helpful. One of our directors I just sent, she just is wrapping up the director fellowship too. And she is a very, she's towards the end of her career. I think she's going to retire in the next year or two. And she was pretty adamant in not participating. She's very introverted. It has been mind-blowing for her. She has loved it. And she's like, you know what? I don't know. Let me ask my fellowship group. And she'll send them a little text. What are y'all doing? And then she comes back and she's like, well, actually, I think she was asking, and I told you this, Crystal, about the 4-day work week. And she had gotten kind of some of the other side of, it's not all glitz and glam. There's some other pieces to it. And so it's been really great to just hear some of those different sides across the country too.
So I'm curious, you're in an ACNO role now, and most of my work, I love the frontline leader. But when I hear the executives speak, any regrets come from, I missed out with my kids, I missed out on time, things that mattered. And when you said I'm physically stuck in the hospital, like that's how their brains work. And I've seen them say, my child wrote a letter to my boss that says, please, please, please let my mommy come on the field trip. How are you maintaining that for those listening that are struggling with that?
I had listened. I don't remember if it was a speaker. It was a speaker at Magnet or at ENA that had said her daughter was in high school and was kind of starting the work of what she was going to do in college and what her career was going to be. And she said, are you interested in nursing at all? And her daughter said, no, why would I want to do that? All you do is come home and complain about how hard the job is, how tired you are. Why would I want to do that? And so that really struck a chord with me because I thought, what am I saying at home? What are my kids hearing? All of that piece. I will say, I think from a leadership perspective, they've been really supportive here to allow, and that's where I do love the manager and upper, is that you're not stuck in a 3 12-hour shift that you can't get out of. We're pretty flexible here in allowing people to go to the field trip, whatever that may be. We had implemented here a work from home day once every pay period for our nurse managers to allow them to get caught up and also to allow a little bit of, free time too. And so they really have been using that. And we still have kept that going. I think it's also like every snow day, both of my kids are like, oh my God, I can't wait for snow day. Sorry, Mom, you're going to be stuck at the hospital. Because we do a huge incident command here. We sleep at the hospital and we just did it 2 weeks ago. And I mean, it's kind of fun, but you do miss out a little bit on that. But I have a fabulous, we call him Ben the husband. I have a fabulous husband who really makes those events even more fun. And you're a little sad you miss out, but it's kind of his time to shine too. He had, my son's 15. He had 8 15-year-olds. He's cooking them breakfast. He's cooking them everything. He's drying all their clothes after the snow. I mean, it was really fun. So, I think sometimes, it's a wax and wane. It's not always bad that you're missing out. Sometimes it's somebody else's moment to shine too. And so I kind of look at it like that too.
I think the attitude and being positive about how you have to be flexible in those roles is really key, which is what I hear, what I feel like you're emulating is, not necessarily looking at it as a negative, but as positive. You're doing, serving the community, also serving your family, but also having a positive outlook on, meeting the needs of both parties. So I love that. So I will say you came on the Rule Breakers, and we have to know, because I know personally that Missy is a rule breaker.
I am a big rule breaker.
So we have to know, if you're breaking any rule in healthcare, what's the rule?
I mean, that ER background means everything's a sea of gray, right? It doesn't mean, I don't even know how I did ICU for a little bit, because that's just not me. I'm organized, but I like unstructure, I guess. I have broken so many rules. And I had shared with both of these ladies during the fellowship some of my really amazing HR moments. I am a big advocate for staff. I don't feel like anybody shows up to work to do a bad job. I think that we put things in place that make people, in the moment, make not the best decisions, but it is what it is. And so I am a huge HR and I are always at war. One of my first conversations with a staff member was they were trying to terminate him because he left, gave his badge to somebody and said, clock me out. I deserve 30 minutes. So I'm going to leave early on my shift, but clock me out right at 7 o'clock. He left at 6:30. And he wasn't wrong. He was deserved the lunch break. And so they wanted to terminate him. And I actually walked it back and said, okay, let's talk through this. In his mind, he felt like he's owed the break. And so I was able to get that reversed. We did like a final warning with him, and he's actually now one of our managers. We just got him into the manager role within the last year, and he is phenomenal. And so I think, a big piece of that is really taking a step back, getting everybody's side of the story and understanding, why did they make that decision? But in the meantime, I also myself have made some of those really great decisions. So I like puns. I like, funny things for staff to remember things. And so I did a project. It was kind of right around that time with the guy that was interviewed that was like, hide your kids, hide your wife, because everybody be coming up in here. And so it reminded me of Joint Commission. And so when Joint Commission comes, everybody's like, hide your drinks, hide your snacks, Joint Commission coming up in here. So we put together to optimize our readiness when Joint Commission gets here. We made a packet, and it was like, these two nurses are going to go check this room. These two nurses are going to do this. And so it was very organized, structured. So on the day that they came, we would hand out these things, and it meant that our whole department, many hands, little work, all 15 of our nurses at 7 a.m. were going to run around, and they were going to check all those things, and we would be great. And so in theory, the whole thing was great. Except for I titled the packet, I put that guy's picture on the front of the packet, and I titled it, Let's Smoke This Joint Commission. And our HR officer didn't appreciate it as much as we thought. It was so funny. So luckily he had a lot of grace and knew kind of where I was coming from. We had come up with, we were having a lot of issues with peer-to-peer feedback. And so we came up with a program where we were doing the brown frown stickers. So you remember the stickers you got in kindergarten that were like the little circles, and it was like a smiley face, and they scratch and sniff them, and they smelled really good. Well, we decided to do those faces in brown with the brown frown. And if your attitude stunk, anybody could put a sticker on you, and they could say, your attitude stinks, here's a brown frown sticker. And so it was just kind of our way of trying to promote, like, instead of coming back to the office and saying, hey, Missy's attitude sucks today, she can't do blah, 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 because we were very much in like a tattletale culture. I was like, no, you need to say, Crystal, your attitude stinks today. I need you. And so we're trying to do something fun with it. Well, I had one of my nurses turn me in and say he was going to file assault charges if I stuck a brown frown sticker on him. And I'm like, listen. So we eliminated that program also really quickly. And then I have one more that was really great too. So we were working really hard on our admission collection. So like when patients are discharged, we were trying to walk them by this dismissal desk so they could collect their copay before they left, because our admissions team was kind of tentative. They didn't like going into the ER room if a patient was emergent, or and you know, a majority of them are emergent, but they didn't feel comfortable going in the room. So they had asked that we would walk the patient to this dismissal desk and then out. And, you know, the nursing staff didn't care. They don't care about copays. They don't care. You know, they just didn't care. So I was like, well, let's do a project to try and get this. So I did a Let's Make It Rain project where we like hung dollar bills, like fake dollar bills, in the break room, and like did this whole Make It Rain project to try and collect money. And one of my medics came back and he's like, do you know that song? And I was like, yeah, I mean, a little bit. And he's like, I mean, do you know what it references? And I was like, no. And I guess apparently it's all about strippers. And so we had to immediately pull that program back too. So, you know, my team was very flexible. They just would always laugh at every little nuance. I have since obviously found the error of my ways, but you know, I will say, you know, everything came with good intentions, and you know, I just kind of towed the line of funny and engaging to inappropriate. But you know, I think our HR bestowed the same amount of grace that I bestowed on our staff as well, and were really supportive and kind, and really helped me kind of really navigate my way through being an early leader.
Okay, so greatest stories ever, and I'm laughing just as hard now as I did
Yes.
when I heard them during the fellowship. But I have to comment. So just going back to the person that you saved essentially from termination. So I was him as a bedside nurse. I mean, you talk about like wild card. You know, I might have said something, I wasn't trying to be hurtful, but like if you did something that didn't make any sense, I might say like, are you stupid? Like, why do we do that? Why do we make that decision? You know, and people didn't always appreciate it, especially as a charge nurse. But I was not being like trying to be mean, just thinking, just, you know, like I wasn't as polished then. So I mean, I can say like how many times I had to go to my manager's office and she saved me more times than Judy ever should have had to save me. But she was like, I like you. I really like you, but I need you to stop coming in my office. I need people to stop turning you. And I was like,
sure.
I'm gonna change my ways. I'm gonna change my attitude. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna figure it out. And I really had to do some soul searching, like to see if I really wanted to get fired over my mouth, or if I wanted to, you know, like grow up and be something, right?
Right.
But I think it's, you know, just to hear you say like, yes, people can make mistakes. And I feel that in myself, you know, like I wasn't trying to be, you know, you're not, maybe not intentionally making those decisions, but it's just kind of like that unpolished thought of like, oh, you know, like what the heck? Like, why did we do that? Like, why are we making that decision? But not really thinking about, you know, you don't really have enough emotional intelligence to understand like the adverse reaction of that. And I mean, like, you know, at 23 years old on night shift as the charge nurse, like I had no emotional intelligence, right? Like I was barely, you know, I barely had enough maturity to have a license. So, so I love that you know, take that opportunity to say like, okay, let's walk this back. Let's really look at the situation. And then now here you have someone who's like a great member of your management team, you know, and is making a great impact on the organization versus they could have been terminated and had that on their record. So I love that. I'm a huge proponent of like HR partnerships. There's the good things that you need to know and they can help you and they need to help you. But then there are some things that you're like, why is this, you know, part of the process? So I think nurses, as a nurse, I tend to be like, oh, well, there's got to be a workaround. Like we don't actually need to follow that law. And then, and then them reining you back and be like, yeah, you actually do. So it's nice to, you know, just hear your take on that from you know, from another perspective.
I just have to say, I love these stories, and I hope that other people can see themselves. I mean, you're an ACNO now, and
Right.
look, but one of my top values is humor. So the fact that you can make laughter out of a regulatory survey, right? Or collecting money. It is so good. It is so good. So I do think we need that balance of how do we get the humor. It takes me back to, it was my very first meeting as a new manager. It was a shared governance meeting. I was brand new and I had worked with these people. And someone brought in a poster, "We are saving lives just by cleaning junk." And it was a karate poster, and it took me a minute because the photos on it, I thought they might have been of patients. Turns out they were not, thankfully. But I mean, everything about it. And I was like, wait, junk? Like, you mean, she's like, they're junk. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I so appreciate this, but we can't put this out for the public to see. Like, so there's a fine balance of how you do that. But you know what? I bet you guys did smoke that Joint Commission survey.
Did. We were so organized. We just needed to tweak it a little bit, just a little bit.
Live and learn. I love those stories. Thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share them. And who knows, maybe you're an HR leader in your future.
I hope, maybe somebody was able to speak at a conference in regards to this rogue ER manager that they were able to rehab. I don't know.
I love it.
Okay, Missy, if anyone wanted to connect with you after hearing you on the podcast, what's the best place for them to be able to do that?
I would probably say just email me. I have a LinkedIn account, but to be very honest, I am not the best LinkedIn person. So you can always just email me and I can send that to you and y'all can post it wherever.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. And, honestly, I mean, I think my kind of final thought, as I spoke early on in my career, I felt like I got tapped on the shoulder a lot. And so I feel like it's my role then to kind of look forward and pay that forward and really start tapping other people on the shoulder. And I most recently did that. We have our VP of operation position that's open, and our radiology director, man, she is amazing. And so I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, are you interested in applying for that?" And she said, "No, I don't even think I'm qualified." And I'm like, "What do you mean you're not qualified? Do you not have your master's?" I mean, she's like, "No, I do, but there's a university here down in San Antonio that like outputs hospital presidents." And so she said, "Well, I didn't go to that university, and I figured they weren't going to hire me because I didn't go there." And I'm like, "What?" I mean, that seems so foreign to me and just crazy. And so she's one of our final candidates right now. We're getting ready to finalize the interview. And so I just feel like, it is our role to pay it forward, to extend that same grace that was given to me, to continue to tap people on the shoulder that may not necessarily think, the manager I talked about earlier, he was an ER nurse. Now he's over our cardiac step down unit. And that was not a role he anticipated. And he's just rocking it, and so I think it's our job, the further up you go, is to help recruit and to start, also paying that forward too.
Well, I think it's just incredible to manage others up, right? Like, that's always it's always such a great place to be, in that opportunity to give someone else an opportunity, right? Just like you had. So I love that. I love your final thought. Well, yes. I do want to say thank you sincerely. I'll speak on behalf of Crystal and I. We're so excited to have you on the podcast and be able to share your voice and, just your views and your background, I think is incredible. So thank you again for coming on the Rule Breakers. And we love being able to welcome Missy officially to the Rule Breakers Club. So
yes.
Thank you for having me. It's so fun.
So much fun. So many good nuggets of incredible leadership and the laughter. This is going to be one of the funnier episodes. So thank you for that.
I love it. Well, thank you guys.
Bye.